Building rapport, making people feel at ease. I think that was a great learning ground for me as a young person to build those skills, and that's really carried, I think.
I don't think so. It's a weird kind of connection between being a makeup artist, dressing up human or a person, to dressing up an organization.
Yeah.
Can you draw some parallels for me between being a makeup artist and being in the HR lead for an organization?
You know what? I think I learned from that, probably two main things that carried with me from that time. How to talk to people. You know, often as when you're doing someone's makeup, it could be their wedding day, so they're freaking out and they're nervous because it's their big day, or it's a model about to go out on the catwalk who has giant shoes and they're worried, you know, that they're not going to make it, you know, to someone who's got really low self-confidence and has come to see you to try and feel better. So you're in people's spaces, you're seeing them in a relatively vulnerable space. So building rapport, making people feel at ease. I think that was a great learning ground for me as a young person to build those skills, and that's really carried, I think, through my career. And the other one is I will never stop caring about aesthetics. You know, we've just done a rebrand at Zest. I literally have the merch in my bag, so I'm showing everyone that I can. But I think that's important, right? How you visually show up as a business and as a brand says so much about who you are. And it's not only just about standing out, but it's about knowing what your purpose is, why you exist, and how can you demonstrate that through everything that you do. So my attention to detail on how things look and how they're presented is very, very high. And I think that comes from you know, caring about the finer details as a makeup artist. Other than that, I'm not sure much came across with me.
I think people management and people skills and understanding people at a very intimate level, I think that's powerful. It's easier to do one-to-many conversation probably, but it's difficult to do one-to-one conversation because that's where, you know, the flaws come up. Whereas in one-to-many, one could hide behind so much. So I think that's what you learn very well, one-to-one.
And I mean, that's a big part of HR, right? Whether it's you might be making someone redundant, you know, there might be someone who's been having a pattern of sickness and you need to have a conversation with them to try and find out what's going on and how the organisation can, you know, provide supports or, you know, adapt. And they can be really tough conversations. I've had some really tough conversations with individuals who've shared all sorts of things, you know. So being able to be empathetic and sit in that space and support them through that, but also maintain enough distance that you can kind of navigate through that situation. It's a very complex skill set, and I think we don't give enough recognition to the emotional load that our HR folks carry in organisations, because they are the ones who are having these conversations, who the staff are telling about these things, you know. So how do we give them a little bit more space to acknowledge and deal with some of that emotional load that they carry?
So why does there's a myth which exists that HR people are not, generally speaking, people don't have a strong opinion of HR people?
I think it's...
Why is that the case?
I think there's a bit of the historical piece, you know. I think historically HR was the personnel department. It was quite transactional. It wasn't strategic.
Industrial relations.
It was seen as very much, you know, the enforcer of the employer. I believe that's evolved a lot recently. You know, if we look at the closing the loopholes legislation, the stuff that Labor's brought in, and generally the way we're shifting as a society, you know, people want to bring their whole selves to work. And what I actually find is probably more of the challenge is managers or senior leaders who've grown up in organisations that are used to a more corporate, maybe authoritarian, maybe didactic kind of model, who are now faced with a cohort of employees in the room, in their organisation, who want to talk about emotions and who want work-life integration and who see the world really, really differently. So I would say that the biggest theme that I'm seeing at the moment is a real challenge for people around how do I navigate the expectations of the younger generation who are coming into the organisation when it's not what I've seen and what I've known and I don't know how to adapt. I feel like I totally avoided why HR people are seen as the bad guy. But the other reason I would say potentially for that is maybe they've had a bad experience, you know. You have one bad experience with a HR function that is quite, you know, not empathetic, not holistic, you know, and you tend to carry that with you. But I don't know, the folks I see are mostly doing really good stuff.